Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the July Executive Scrutiny Board meeting. Do have apologies. I've got those from Rob Cooper and from Alison Martin. I don't think anybody else is missing, are they? I've got no late items to be introduced. Do I have any declarations of interest? Okay, if there's none, we'll move on to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of June. You've all had copies of those. Item 5, the forward plan. You should have also had a copy of the forward plan. If you haven't, please shout out. Okay, item 6, Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. I think you've got those in front of you this evening. And moving on to item 7, that's the Cabinet agenda. The first item on that is item 8, and I think this is possibly just for noting, but it's with regard to the topic review, early intervention and youth outreach support engagement. The review is now completed and the recommendations are agreed, and that report will be going forward to Cabinet tomorrow evening. Okay, Lucy.
I think, Chair, that we have the opportunity to comment on it for the benefit of Cabinet and their reaction to it. They were obviously being asked to take some action, which is in their remit rather than in the Scrutiny Commission's remit. And the element that I thought that was worth highlighting is that, yes, it's absolutely right that we are considering in the forefront of all young people, those who are most vulnerable. But I think there's a challenge, particularly at the current time when we know that mental health is an issue for young people, as it is with many people. It can be quite difficult to know who the vulnerable young people are when it comes to mental health. They can be in any community from any background. And I think that needs to be borne in mind in the work that is being done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point, Lucy. Okay, if there's no more comments from anybody on that particular item, we'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is enforced sale of empty properties and land.
Chair, we're not voting on item 8. Is there no vote on that?
Sorry?
Is there no vote on item 8?
No.
We haven't voted on item 8 there. We're not supposed to vote on item 8.
I don't think we don't have a vote on it.
No, Chair, it was if members did want to comment, the Chair was suggesting it was for noting because it's to let you all know that they've completed their topic review, the Children and Young People's Board, and so it's going to Cabinet tomorrow with the 2 recommendations that they've agreed at their meeting in June, and the draft, along with the draft report.
So there's no need for us to vote on the recommendations then, is that what we're saying?
Well, if you've got any recommendations, then yeah, you can put them forward. And
I was just checking if we need to vote on the recommendations.
No one's indicated they want to do that, but if you want to do, you can.
Obviously. Yeah, we would have, if there were any additional recommendations that came up from the discussion, then we would have gone to vote on those.
Okay. Right.
Can I say, Chair, if somebody would like us to draft some words in support along the lines of I've just said and would like to second that, then I'm very happy to draft some words. If that's our message to Cabinet.
I think that's up to you and your colleagues. Okay, all right. As we were, item 9, enforced sale of empty properties and land. Who's speaking to this? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. So sometimes the council end up dealing with properties that have been empty for a long period of time, and those properties accumulate debt to the council, whereby the council has to move in and perhaps board up the property, or sometimes even undertake structural repairs to ensure that they're safe. In those cases where those debts occur, if the owners repeatedly fail to pay those debts and also repeatedly fail to bring those properties back into use, the council can go for an enforced sale, which requires the owner of that property to sell the property, and if that doesn't happen, the council will sell the property take it to auction and force the sale. This report proposes that course of action be delegated to the Section 151 officer in association with the relevant cabinet member, and it just speeds up that process, Chair, without us having to take a property to cabinet to get that approval. And in any case, Chair, that would be a confidential report as well. So the benefit to cabinet of seeing that report is limited. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question? I mean, could the policy here apply to commercial properties?
It doesn't, Chair, because our remit is purely for empty residential properties. But I know this query has come in recently, Chair, and we have asked the head of legal for an opinion as to whether the council could, outside of this process, go for an enforced sale.
Yeah, the reason I asked that, because I'm aware of what was previously accommodation. It was used by 400 years ago, the Abbey Pub, which is, there's 3,000 people approaching now, have signed a petition calling on the City Council to take some action along with English heritage. And that used to be a hostelry for the Abbey that was there. So it was residential accommodation. And being as it's a Grade 2 star listed scheduled monument, then certainly we need to be about the business of protecting it and to demonstrate that as well to the people of Derby. So is that something that could be considered?
It is that example, Chair, where we have written to the head of legal to ask his opinion as to whether some enforced action could be taken in relation to that property.
Okay. Can you come back to me on that one,
yes,
please?
Thank you very
much.
Yes.
Are there any other comments? And then Lucy, thanks.
Your microphone's on, Chair. I've just got a question for the officer, really. I think it's a good report, and I'm entirely in favour of approving it. But did it also apply? There's no mention anywhere near of where we're owed back council tax. Can this mechanism be used for council tax as well, or is that a separate process? Because that seems like having two lots of ammunition to do the same job, really. Good question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it can be council tax. It can be care home debts as well, Chair, which obviously can get quite sizable.
No, sorry. Oh, it's just coming back then. I think that should be mentioned. I don't know whether we've got time to amend this report, but I think the fact that council tax can be recovered, because there are specific items in here, but not council tax. So if that could be inserted, I'd be a happy bunny.
Apologies, Chair. I don't think we can change the report, but perhaps when we introduce the item tomorrow night to Cabinet, we could make that clear that council tax debt is a qualifying debt. Okay. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. From my perspective as a ward councillor, the delegation will mean that I don't know what's happening in my ward. And it won't be clear how much activity there has been along this agenda in any given year. So I've got a recommendation, Chair, which I'd like to read out to you, to say that we recommend to Cabinet that the details of the process of delegation includes a mechanism to enable ward councillors to know what is happening in their ward, and that there should be a report coming at least annually to a public committee giving a summary of the activity under this delegation.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I'd like to second that as well. Yeah. Is it necessary for us to have a recommendation vote, or is that something that can be accommodated?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to commit to do that if that would be helpful.
I think it should be, as it's not included in the report, I think we should make it as a recommendation to Cabinet.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, thank you. Yes, so this is the report for the final accounts for the 2021 financial year. Just to note really that the position at the end of the year was considerably more positive than what we'd been forecasting at the quarter 3 position. If you can recall, at quarter 3 we were forecasting quite a significant overspend of 6.4 million. The actual revenue outturn has seen that we're able to put just shy of 2 million, 1.9 million back into reserves, the budget risk reserve. So that was a significant movement from quarter 3. The main reasons for the movement was that we applied £5 million worth of COVID funding during the final quarter. What we'd done is we'd earmarked a significant amount, just over 4 million, for social care activity in the final quarter. Our indications were that was going to spike. But the services, particularly the children and young people's services, managed to contain the looked after children population at around about 550. Whereas we were expecting that population figure to rise to just shy of 600. So there was an amount of COVID monies that was available there. We also had some additional income that came to fruition during the end of the financial year in the last quarter as well, which is detailed in the report. So there was, as I said, quite a significant movement and a positive position that we could actually put monies back into the budget risk reserve. The report details the significant variances from quarter 3, so I won't go into that in detail. I'm quite happy to pick those up. On the capital programme, the original programme was 183 million and the actual spend was 98.6 million, which was 54% of the original programme. However, the final adjusted capital programme was 130 million, so we had identified slippage during the year and that had been previously approved by the appropriate mechanisms. So of the final adjusted programme, we did spend 76% of that final adjusted programme. I suppose just saying the risks going forward in terms of the fact that although we had a positive outcome in the last financial year, the impact of COVID on services going forward is still significant and not necessarily identified at this stage. Risks around collection rates, business rates, income across the city and demand on our services still continue. Happy to take some questions.
It's just a very simple question. 4.1.16, which is on page, I forget now, 7 I think it is, 7, says an unachievable saving of 100 million for loss of leisure income mitigated by a one-off solution. I'd quite like to know what the one-off solution was, because it's not mentioned, unless I've missed it somewhere else in the report, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was an acknowledgement that there's quite a few of the original savings in the MTFP that weren't achievable and that alternative one-off solutions were found. So I think that goes beyond that. So I'm quite happy to gather that information and send it to you in terms of how the services delivered those, if that's okay. Yeah, I think there's quite a few of alternative savings across the council.
Thank you. I'd like clarification, please, on paragraph 2.2J, where the suggestion is delegated authority to the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources. Any further transfers? Is this related to any further transfers related to this accounts in this financial year, or is that an open-ended statement forever?
No, it's just in relation to this. So it's obviously this is all subject to external audit. In terms of the final accounts, so that delegation is if there's any changes to the position during that process.
I think, Chair, we should be clear through yourself or through officers that this delegation that is being approved is for this year's budgets, the current year's budgets. No, last year's budgets, which we are considering at the moment, are not as an open-ended statement because it seems a bit open-ended to me at the moment. I also had a question about Appendix 4, which refers to slippage to 21-22 and brought forward from 21-22. They do the two sections of the different budget.
Just finding Appendix 4, sorry, Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, I didn't look up the page number.
The acoustics are not very good here. Can everybody hear?
We like online, don't we, really?
Are you okay?
So it's page 36.
Yeah, so capital slippage to next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
So that's this year, 21-22.
Yes. This is we're in 21-22 at the moment. This report relates to
and
2021.
spend brought forward from.
Yeah, that should be the previous year. Yeah.
Sorry. So when it says spend brought forward from 21-22, is that an error?
Yes.
And it should say.
Yeah.
And it should say 2019-20?
Yeah. I need to clarify that one for
Okay.
you. Doesn't make sense, does it, that final one
Well,
there?
I struggled with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Are there any other comments at all? I've just got some few general ones. There's certainly no criticism of any officers here, or indeed within the council itself, but the concern I think that's been raised by members of my group about the use of reserves. It seems to be an endless shift, and eventually we will run out of reserves. And that feared black hole sort of looms. My fear is, and a lot of councils' fears are, how far we're away from the situation that a number of councils in this country face. And we just wonder how long we can continue using reserves. Well, the reserves are an infraction of what they were 5 or 6 years ago. How much headway have we got before there's at least a fundamental look at council finances?
I don't think we disagree with you that there's the pressure generally on local government funding and particularly the impact of COVID going forward. I think the use of our reserves last year was a more positive position than what we'd originally anticipated, and we did actually put monies back into budget risk reserve. But obviously, as I said in the opening of the report, there are unprecedented pressures going forward, which we are yet to articulate and realise. Acknowledgement that there is pressures going forward. I can't tell you how long we've got until we would run out of reserves, but there obviously is a pressure on public spending going forward in light of the ongoing implications of the pandemic.
Right, okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on, if there's no more questions at all. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye. To item 11, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. I think you're on again.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So this is a fairly standard regular report that comes to Council Cabinet in dealing with the compliance of our contract and financial procedure rules. We have 6 substantive items on there really, of which 4 are in relation to acceptance of grants or approval to put bids in for grants. We have an item on there in relation to our treasury management policy, and one around sub-delegations for the Ascend loan. In terms of the Treasury Management Strategy, this is an amendment to the Treasury Management Strategy to include Derby Homes Limited on the list of approved sources for short and long-term borrowing. Historically, we operated both the Derby City Council and the Derby Homes as a combined account with Lloyds Bank, of which we could transfer funds between the two accounts. That's now the facility to offer the combined facility no longer exists for legal reasons, as they're 2 separate legal entities. So we need to formalise the cash transactions and borrowing between the two organisations. So that is asking for a recommendation to add Derby Homes as a borrower within the Treasury Management Policy. We also have on the report a domestic abuse safe accommodation acceptance of a grant of 600,000 for that particular funding stream. This is a funding stream which has been made available through MHCLG, and it does replace the historic domestic abuse fund which we've been in receipt of. This grant will provide continuity of funding as we come to assess the new strategy that needs to be in place, of which future commissioning decisions can be based. The second grant is approval to bid for Homes England for up to £500,000. The details of bids are still being worked through, but it will enable the works for the South Derbyshire Growth Fund and will support things like studies to understand the potential of hydrogen fuel technologies that can be applied to the Infinity Garden Village with draining and flood mitigation issues. So that work's still underway, but the application is up to £500,000 of revenue funding to support that initiative. We do have on here as well the Ascend loan, so it's to approve some sub-delegations for loans below 250,000, subject to due diligence within those support loans. There's an approval here for to make a formal bid to the Home Office for the Safer Streets 3 National Fund. And there's also an acceptance of a grant of 800,000 for the extension of the COVID local support grant with delegated approval to allocate the COVID local support grant in line with the eligible criteria. This has been a particular, in terms of that grant, our allocations didn't come through until the end of June. I think it was the 21st of June for those allocations. So the working up of the programme is still underway in that course, hence the delegation to the relevant directors. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got. Do you want to take them, Chair, as one subject at a time, or shall I go through the whole lot? I'll go through the lot as it is. I'll start by saying that I'm on the Derby Homes Board, and it's very this change to the loans process is very much welcomed by them, though it appears that the consultation that is mentioned, that they haven't actually been closely involved. They weren't aware that it was going to Cabinet tomorrow. In terms of the Homes England capacity funding, one area that we as a council need to do more in, regardless of the hydrogen economy, is actually to save energy first, and therefore how we can ensure that the new homes that are being built in Infinity Village don't require even hydrogen to keep them warm and pleasant is actually a higher priority, in my view, than actually rebuilding on a hydrogen economy. So I want to suggest a recommendation to Cabinet that Homes England capacity funding, that the purpose for the Homes England capacity funding includes spending on work to help achieve zero carbon homes, including carbon sequestration, which means taking recent carbon, such as in trees, and incorporating that into the building, following on the work done by Derby Homes, and to seek to make this application applicable to all housing developers and to feed into the local plan policies. Because I think that will do more to help Derby achieve zero carbon, which has clearly been one of the intentions that we're working on as a city.
In actual fact, I think it may be best if we steer at one time, because that's an important.
Do you want to pause there, Chair?
Yeah, you can pause there, and then I'll take the comments other people make.
Yeah, in the relevant paragraph, it says that capacity funding is usually allocated for activities, and it goes on to say, support innovation in design and delivery, which falls in with what Councillor Kerr was saying, so I would support her recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to reinforce that funding from Homes England does have some guidelines and criteria attached to it, so our ability to be flexible around that is to a degree limited. I can't explain exactly that limitation around this particular grant, but there is that caveat to be aware of.
Thank you. Regarding the Ascend funding, this is a situation a bit like the one I mentioned before on empty properties, in that I think there ought to be a mechanism to say how we're going to provide information on what the fund is doing, whether we have an annual report or we have a report to Cabinet. But I think there should be some mechanism alongside that, and I don't know whether that's already built into the scheme or whether that's something, again, that we should suggest to Cabinet that we do.
I think that's reasonable to be able to report on that.
Are you okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
If we're happy to accept that, Chair, as a officer level decision. And again, on the Safer Streets bid, it's not quite clear here as to who is actually doing the spending, whether we're doing it out in-house or whether organisations should be bidding for that spend. And I was very interested, particularly in the light of the paper we had at the very beginning of the meeting, as to how children and young people, and obviously girls come into that category, are being consulted on how we can make our open spaces feel safer for girls, maybe from the age of 8 to 18, before they become adults and are being consulted in a more formal way. So, you know, there's a question there on the consultation, and then there's the mechanism by which the money is going out to and who is spending it.
Chair. Yes, around the Safer Streets 3 bid, and this is the third round of funding from government. I'm sure Councillor Dinsdale will know about this information from the Office of Public and Crime Commissioner, making that available to support safety measures. This particular round, we have worked really hard with our voluntary and community sector organisations across the city, doing that sort of consultation. I think previously it was very much focused on hard capital funding, sort of CCTV, lighting, that sort of thing. So part of our bid will includes those things, but also it includes some other measures about how we change mindsets and behaviour and attitudes towards women and girls. And we've worked with groups that represent those areas in developing our bid. So there's always more we can do about that, absolutely, and we absolutely welcome any sort of pressure to do more of that. But just to reassure members, we have at this stage worked with them quite well to try and develop our bid. It is quite multifaceted, and we can bring that to a further meeting for more information at a future meeting. That would be helpful for members.
It's, yes, the spending is being done, but by whom, how would an organisation bid for it? But I was noting that in paragraph 5.3, it said that meetings have taken place with local VAWG representatives and focus groups, but none of those were specifically related to children, young girls who are still at school, as opposed to older groups. It talks about the university, safe and sound women's work. But I don't think it doesn't say we're working with Voices in Action, for example, or with schools. And I think that maybe those groups need to be included in some way.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, Chair. As far as I'm aware, we did talk to Voices in Action, also the Youth Alliance, and I understand through the schools network as well, to try and speak to younger younger women, younger girls. So it has been, we can always do more of that. But the proposal for the fund is that we've put in a proposal of how we would use it, and it would be then the council using that money to achieve some of those outcomes. So it is very much the council, you know, commissioning that work, if you like, but it has been done in consultation, if that helps.
But no, thank you. It's the list there isn't an exclusive list, but is this... I was going to go on to the next subject. Do you want to speak on this one?
Just on the same. Yeah. Just to say, I mean, I think this report is just asking approval to make the formal bid. Some of the questions and the issues are something that once, if we are successful, I think it's something that we do need to look at how we actually then use the funding, what impact it will make, and what outcomes we're looking for. So I think, yeah.
Really useful to have Lucy suggested, but we have about time, not
Yeah,
choosing.
yeah.
This is about a bit.
Yeah.
And so I think what Hardy, correct me if I'm wrong, Hardy, was suggesting.
If we can pick it up at an officer level, yes, and particularly if members are asked to contribute, that would be helpful. Finally, Chair, I just wanted to say something about the climate implications and possibly the equality implications at the end. It states here that climate implications not applicable. And clearly from what I've talked about already in terms of our bid to Homes England, there could be climate implications on this report. There could also be climate implications on other elements of this report, including what we're doing in terms of safer streets, which organisations we invest money in Ascend, and so on. And I think that whoever is writing the report and responsible for it needs to think harder about the potential of good work that could be done on the climate agenda, as well as other elements here. Again, on the equality implications, the points that have been pulled out are clearly there in terms of domestic abuse safe accommodation and extensive support for the COVID grants. But again, there's no mention there within that about even the safer streets work, which again is an equalities issue. So I think the level of internal thought that is going into how we are delivering some of these things could be notched up to give us a clearer view on the potential good that we can do in spending when in these other areas, despite a subject not being absolutely in your face, an equalities issue or a climate issue.
Some very important points, Lucy. And again, it may, I think, fit in with what we discussed a minute or two ago. I think both this committee and I'm sure office as well would welcome your input and your suggestions to see what is possible and what's doable in terms of trying to get these aspects right. So if you'd be prepared to do that, Lucy, alongside officers, and officers, you know, I think we're pushing an open door. We'll consider all these, Lucy.
Chair, it's something officers should be have the training given to them if they're not already capable of doing this. But if anybody wants to ask me, I am not an expert in equalities. I do know quite a lot about climate, okay. But it's something that is a training issue more than anything else.
And I think it's important to raise that as well. Yeah, Rachel, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, and I think I would say we're trying really hard internally to raise the awareness and understanding of our officer corps on some of the, particularly the implications around the climate change recommendation, because I think we've probably done a lot of training around equality, and that's not, you know, it's quite well understood. I think there's more of a challenge, perhaps, for officers in some areas in really thinking through what would be the potential impact potentially on climate. So we have got some internal training and support, but anything we can learn from, you know, councillors with a real keen interest and knowledge would be really valuable to help us to shape that.
Yeah, I think that's a good offer. Good offer. Okay, Lucy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we've debated that quite well. Moving on, item 12 now, Council Plan Monitoring Quarter 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presents performance highlights during the final quarter of the year, covering the period from January to March. It provides an update on our priority performance measures, our key milestones, our priority projects, and also our strategic risks that are in line with the current council plan. As with previous performance reports that have been considered by both Scrutiny and Cabinet, we've not reported on positions against targets over the last year, and we've also limited year-on-year comparisons, just reflecting that obviously this year is not easily comparable to historical years, and we've not necessarily been in a position to accurately forecast target positions for the year. The table in paragraph 4.3 provides an overview of outcomes by the council plan priority themes, and there's also alignment there to the recovery plan, so it will bridge that gap with reporting as we move forward into this year. Just to identify a couple of key achievements over the last year, we've made some positive progress with some of our priority capital projects, and areas that are specifically referenced at the end of Q4 relate to Beckett-Well and the A52, so some really good progress there. There's been a full review of progress against the written statement of action plan in readiness for a re-inspection of our local area in the autumn in relation to services for children with special educational needs and disabilities. There's been a lot of targeted work, not just over the final quarter, but over the year in terms of supporting the economic recovery of the city in response to the pandemic, and it's also already been mentioned tonight in relation to Project Ascend, which is a key activity that was launched over the last quarter. We've continued to work really closely with some of our key stakeholders, and particularly our colleagues within the NHS, via the winter plan, hospital discharge, and managing demand within the community, which has been of particular importance over the period of January to March, as this was quite a peak period in relation to the pandemic as well. So I think that is evidence in some positive outcomes. And the report also highlights that we've seen some really good results in terms of the public health measures that we monitor as part of the council plan, and this is despite the impacts of the pandemic and the need to reprioritise activity in some areas. Following the theme of the pandemic and COVID, we've actually seen a reduction in our strategic risk register in the scores of some of our COVID-associated risks. So to pick up a couple, the overall likelihood of obviously an outbreak in Derby was reduced in this quarter as a result of the local outbreak management plan and the work of the national roadmap, and our ability to meet demands. We were better informed around where the demand was coming from, and we were able to deliver against the needs that were identified. And then finally, in terms of a key achievement to reflect on over the last year, and of particular interest to executive scrutiny over a number of years, we've actually seen an improvement in the total number of working days lost at the end of this year compared to the previous financial year, which I think is a really positive result in terms of our colleague wellbeing, and is probably a benefit that's been seen through the new ways of working that have been implemented. So ensuring that we obviously present a balanced overview of performance, paragraph 4.4 does identify some areas for development as we moved forward into 2021-22. There are a number of areas of risks identified there linked to some of our performance milestones. It is important to, however, reflect that at the end of Q4 we did not have any new strategic risks escalated, and we saw no increases in scores at this point. So these are areas that we will continue to monitor and report to colleagues as we move forward through this year. In addition to the performance against the council plan, the report also gives the overview of COVID response and recovery, just reflecting that a lot of this activity wouldn't otherwise be captured and reported through to colleagues if we didn't include it, and that's set out in paragraph 4.5. And Appendix 1 provides you with a full overview of activity over the final quarter, with many of those measures being a cumulative update. And from a Cabinet perspective, they are asked to note the performance outcomes. So I think there's lots to be proud of in terms of this report and what it presents.
Thank you. I don't know if you can help, but can you throw any light on it? I saw an email this afternoon which was talking about legal action being taken against 4 authorities, and we're one of them, for children out of placements, the number of children placed out of area. Are we aware of this email that's been doing the rounds this afternoon?
I think that there is activity that's ongoing in relation to sufficiency of placements, but I understand it's historical activity, and obviously Leeds within Children's Services are progressing that forward. It's probably worth noting in the context of that we have recently had a focused visit from our colleagues at Ofsted, which looked at the experiences of children in care and sufficiency, and the letter will be published in August as well. But my understanding is that that activity relates to historical historical placements of children outside of the city.
Right, okay, thank you. Right. Any questions at all? Mike, and then Lucy.
It's just it's a comment really that I think we might want to pass on to one of our other committees. In the section on schools, it talks about very, very low rates of exclusion, which as a former governor, I think that's really good news. And it says permanent exclusions are now at a very low point, and we may have to review the demand for PRUs. Now, there will be people out there who think, I work in one of those, what's going on? So I think if maybe just point towards CYP scrutiny to say, would you want to have a look at this? That's all, Chair. Thank you.
So in terms of the performance in relation to school exclusions, obviously this last year has been an exceptional year of children placed within schools, but overall there's been a lot of activity to support exclusions, which I think has delivered positive outcomes, but any further information obviously would have to be ascertained from the lead officer within that area.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I do know that Pauline Anderson, the Director of Learning and Skills, has actually commissioned a review into the behaviour strategy and alternative provision for education. So the service is already looking at that, acknowledging that we probably have got a different model based on, you know, the practice that's happening at school. So that work is underway.
Yeah, I was also going to ask on children and young people, and it's the significant risk score we've got on the fostering situation and the finances for young people. And I think that maybe we need to do a further review on how we can encourage more individuals and families to want to become foster carers within the city, because the trend towards the city is obviously good, but the overall position on total foster carers we're not moving on. But I also want to know a bit more background, that it refers to the family justice reforms, and I don't know what those are and whether the impact of those are likely to be beneficial or otherwise to us. And the second point, Chair, I just wanted to have checked that the Climate Change Commission is referred to here as having met 3 times, and I think it's probably only met twice, last December and March. And I just think if the report's going further, that ought to be checked.
Okay, so in terms of the recruitment of foster carers, this has obviously been a priority for us for a number of years, and there's been a lot of activity to support an increase in our internal provision. This was a corporate priority for us over the last 2 years, and there was a lot of activity that was coordinated across many different services to support an improvement in that. We have seen an increase in approvals since the introduction of that activity. However, obviously, the report does reflect some of the deregistrations that we've had as carers have either retired or obviously decided that they wanted to pursue other activities. This is another area that is considered as part of our inspection activity to ensure sufficiency, but there are national challenges around sufficiency. But I think one of the positive things that are reflected within the report is that actually we've managed to increase the number of children that are placed within our internal provision through the agile use of our own carers, and working really innovatively across some of our different teams to ensure that we're making the best use of the capacity that we have. But it will remain an ongoing priority for improvement to ensure that we can continue to, obviously, where possible, recruit more carers to Derby.
Can I just add to that as well? The service has commissioned a review around the D2N2 footprint following the lines of the adoption model. So, I mean, it's in its very, very early stages, but it is looking at other opportunities to extend that, those opportunities to get the carers into the system.
No, I haven't got any further information around that, so I think that that's probably something that would be beneficial to come back to colleagues at a future point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this report, and I think it's very good. I'd like to note in Appendix 1, Q4 Performance Report Summary, under SR11, Brexit Transition Impacting the Delivery of Council Services and Wider Outcomes for the City. I see the risk likelihood has been downgraded from possible to remote. And after 5 years of bluster, and quite a lot in this chamber, it's reassuring to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's me again. So this report provides an overview of achievements across the last 12 months, alongside providing a summary of our financial outturns. It's important to note at this point that the report does extend beyond the priorities that have been identified as part of the Council plan. We don't have a statutory duty to publish an annual report, but it's a really good element of our governance framework, and it allows us to reflect on the last year, both in terms of acknowledging the great work that colleagues across the city are undertaking, but also identifying any further opportunities to improve and develop as we move forward. As I said with the previous report, I think this last year has absolutely been a year like no other, and subsequently we've tried to reflect that within the annual report, so there is a spotlight on COVID. I think the important thing to reflect here is that actually we've delivered for Derby with the city, and an immense amount of activity has been undertaken both to respond to and support the recovery from the pandemic, and this is alongside the delivery of business as usual in many instances. I think, as with the previous report, there's a lot to be proud of that's set out within the annual report, and I think it does set out some of the significant achievements that we have delivered. Alongside the summary report, there is a more detailed performance appendix which just identifies some of the key milestones and performance measures that we monitor as part of the council plan. So that just aligns to the position that you see at the end of Q4. But overall, I think hopefully this provides colleagues with a snapshot of all of the activity that's been delivered over the last year, and really sets the foundations for us moving forward with the recovery plan.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just propose a recommendation thanking council officers and council staff for all the work they've done to get the council into this position? Because obviously we've commented throughout the meeting of the difficulties that we faced over the last year and the difficulties that other councils have got themselves into, and we haven't got ourselves into those difficulties. We've had all things considered, very, very strong year. Looking down Appendix 2, there's a lot of green on there. There's a lot of completed. Is there some slippage? Yes, but compared to what it could be, it's certainly not what it could have been in terms of the negatives. There's a lot of positives on there. So can I just propose a recommendation thanking council officers and council staff for all their work?
Chair, can I just clarify something from an earlier question, having digested the outturn report? Councillor raised a query around Appendix 4, around the capital slippage on the outturn report, capital slippage and which years they were related to. Having digested the report, I can confirm the title's actually correct. It talks about capital slippage into 21-22, but spend brought forward that was on the programme for 21-22 that's been spent early, so that's been brought forward from 21-22. So the title is correct. It's spend that's it's items that have moved into next year, but items that have been spent before next year. So just to clarify that. Apologies.
Thanks very much. We have got a final item on the agenda. That's item 14, the UK City of Culture 2025 Expression of Interest. Is that you, Rachel? Rachel, thank you.
It is. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for remembering that report. So really pleased to bring this report to Exec Scrutiny. This is an opportunity opened up by the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, Central Government, for a UK competition. I'm sure you are aware of this at a national level. It was built on the legacy of the European city of culture that Liverpool and other cities were very successful at using in previous years, and the government launched their own UK City of Culture programme, and there have been 3 cities so far identified in that period, and Londonderry, Hull and Coventry actually having their year of culture this year as we speak. Really, really powerful mechanism and around a vision for cultural-led regeneration for a place. A really powerful tool at opportunities to raise the profile of a place in a city, to drive economic growth, to really provide additional investment into that city, to build community strength and resilience, and to instill local pride in a place. So a really powerful opportunity. And members will recall that the recovery plan for Derby is absolutely talks front and centre about reinventing our city, diversifying our economy and using culture, our heritage, the history of this city as being a place of makers and making, innovation and creativity to build that recovery, build back better. So an opportunity arising for us to bid to be City of Culture in the UK 2025, see an opportunity you didn't want to miss. So the launch information came back from government on the 30th of June, so quite a short period of time to turn something round, and asking for expressions of interest by July the 19th, obviously next Monday. So we have been working very strongly with our cultural and other partners across the city over the last month now on trying to really create a really strong narrative based on that sense of our innovative and creative DNA in this city, also on the strength of our national portfolio organisations in our cultural sector. We have a really strong and diverse set of cultural organisations, from hip-hop to theatre, to digital, to jazz and to the museum. We have a really strong legacy in those organisations, and also phenomenal work going recently this year in building the marketplace and the events on the marketplace, but also the opening of the Museum of Making, the Ram Trail, the Book Festival and the Format International Photography Festival, a real sense of things that are happening in our city. So can we use this process as a way of elevating, amplifying all of that as part of our recovery? So the process itself is for expression of interest by July the 19th, and the government then intends to announce 6 places on a long list that will then be invited to put in formal bids for the UK City of Culture, and that will be announced in September, the final bids being expected in January, and then the city chosen for that year to be announced in May. So we are very much at the first stage, and this is giving a report to yourselves sort of after the first stage to support us making that expression of interest, and clearly further reports will come back to members if we are lucky enough to get on the long list and further on. Just in terms of reassuring members about how we're developing the expression of interest, it is very much in our culture of working with our people, so co-producing it with our partners across the city. We had a really effective workshop 2-3 weeks ago now with lots of partners from Marketing Derby and the university and South Derbyshire Council and also our cultural organisations in the college, and everybody is involved in that, in helping us to shape what we think some of the themes will be. And lots of support from our partnership as a whole, so from businesses, the community and voluntary sector, etc., etc. The bid we're considering is based on Derby, but it will include the broader Derbyshire footprint to bring in things that are happening that are exciting and innovative and creative in our broader region. And it is very much about developing the themes that are going to make us stand out. It's really important to stress to members that City of Culture is about using this mechanism to drive regeneration. It's not just about promoting what you already do, but how can you use what you do to make things better? So how do you use it to improve and to mend and fix things? So we're very much looking at some of these emerging themes, how we recognise science, technology and art, the connection. We have a great history here of the Enlightenment, taking things forward and ideas forward. Can we think about a contemporary Enlightenment, how we use those things to build new roles and jobs in the future around using science, technology and art? How we really recognise that culture is at the heart of our city and how important it is in so many of the things that we do across the board, and that young people be in the future. So a real sense of working with our young people to get their vision and their ideas and building, obviously, the eventual programme, and lots of events for them. and that whole story around making and remaking our city. So we've got quite a lot of ideas going on in that sort of pot of ideas that we're bubbling away together at the moment to come up with question of interest. And so that work is happening now. If we are long-listed, we're very hopeful that we will be, but as the competition is quite fierce, you can imagine at a national level, we will then bring back a further Cabinet report around the full bid at that time. So this report is really asking members to sort of support our expression of interest. And we did, I think, announce last week in the press to get ahead of perhaps some of our rival cities, our intention to do that. And it was very well received by our local media and local people. So hopefully members will be behind them. Any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
I just want to make a few comments and I'll bring Hardy and other people in. I mean, I'm sure that this committee will be fully supportive of this bid as I am, as my group are. I don't think any one political party can own this, because for it to be successful, all parties need to own it and all parties need to take part in that actual bid. We must be ambitious, but we must remain optimistic, because we're aware that Coventry has already been awarded the City of Culture, and you know, there are some people who think, well, will they give it to two Midland cities on the road? But nevertheless, we ought to put this bid in, and because I think it lays down the marker, hopefully to win it this time, but if not, certainly in future years. The city has many challenges currently, and as we're working through those challenges, I think we can firm up that bid and put ourselves eventually into pole position. So yeah, I'm sure we are supportive, and we ought to continue to support it in a united way. Hardy.
Just really to add to that, really, I think this is a great opportunity to show the ambition of Derby, and as the officer said, the culture, the richness, the diversity of Derby and what we are already doing, but also the ambition to see how we can actually develop that and build on that. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I think this board should put a recommendation in addition to other. I think the ambition has been supported by Derby Partnership Board, Derby Economic Recovery Group, the Strategic Culture Group. I think this Executive Scrutiny Board to highlight and endorse the all-party, cross-party ambition that we have for Derby, that we put a recommendation in supporting. I would propose a recommendation supporting the wholehearted expression of interest being put forward, and using this as an opportunity to celebrate what we already do in terms of culture and diversity and ambition, but also to use this, whether we are successful or not, to build on that and actually enhance and improve our ambition for Derby and Derby people. And I think it'd be really good if every member from all the different parties gives a unanimous support that we want to make sure, one, we're successful, but if we're not successful, we use this as a springboard to showcase our culture and our ambition and how that can help to regenerate and reinvigorate the city.
If we carry on the discussion, it may be useful if you could just capture something there from all that you've just said. Encapsulates that, please.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to?
Please, if you could just email me that. It was quite lengthy. You may want to, if you wanted it to be that long, that's fine. And I can always read it out if it needs to be. But
yeah. Yeah. Just. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we if we say that this board, which is represented by all parties, is fully supportive and wants to make sure that we seize this opportunity to celebrate our culture, but also to enhance it through this bidding process, whether successful or not, to build on that.
Yes, Chair. I'm reassured by the introduction that we heard from Rachel that we are looking big in terms of this bid. So we're looking beyond the immediacy of the city centre, and I think there's a tendency for us to do things in the city centre and or within a particular location, and we don't cover the city. And for something like this, I think it's vital that we are looking at what we can be doing with all our communities and to leave something in terms of a legacy for all areas of the city. And the reference to nearby councils gives me reassurance that we are going to be looking beyond, though there's still always a tendency to say, well, South Derbyshire is going to be doing something and it'll happen in Swadlincote, and Amber Valley is going to do something and it'll happen in Ripley, and still find that we've not got things happening in maybe Chellaston or Littleover or Alistry. So I have a recommendation which I'd love to have support for, to say to recommend to Cabinet that if long-listed for City of Culture, we ensure that activity and legacy elements are included that will bring new cultural angles to all parts of the city and not just the city centre. Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be incorporated in the recommendation. I suggested that, and I don't think the officers are against it, the idea that we're not just thinking about the city centre, we're thinking about the city as a whole. It's the ambition of culture, and it's city-wide, and I think that can be incorporated.
If you're okay and Lucy okay, we'll take yours and keep sending yours to Stephen, and we'll add to that, Stephen, just comments about it being a sort of cross-party united bid, and this committee fully endorses and supports it.
Chair, it would be easy to put a bit on the beginning and say that, the Scrutiny Committee endorses the direction that the Cabinet is going, and if long listed, yeah. It's gone.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to just say this is a really fantastic thing to go for, and this is really all about Derby. It's a city event, and also it takes us down, if I'm right, Rachel, all the way down to Chatsworth House, and this I know is cross-party support, but I'd like to go probably a little bit bigger and just say that this is. It's a win-win situation as far as I can see. The EOI is short on time, 19th of July, but really to go for the City of Culture is one of the best things we've done in this city for many, many, many years. And we talk about the format, and we talk about the Derby Book Festival, tremendous festivals. We've also got the Caribbean Festival, we've got the Folk Festival, and one that Martin and Argyle is very interested in, which is the Canberra Beer Festival. And this is really what it's all about. So I believe it's cross-party support, but I'd like to really believe that it's non-political, it's all about the city going forward, and that's really what we should all be about. I mean, England was supported by the country a couple of days ago. This is where the city, the whole of the city, supports the City of Culture. So I think it's a fabulous thing to go for.
Yes, thank you, members. To make a point, Hull obviously won the award. 2017 was their year of culture, and during that year they had nearly 3,000 different events, exhibitions, installations, things happening, and across the whole of their city and the broader region. So the amount of things that happened in around that year would be quite incredible in every place in our city. Our advisors, we've got some very sort of very lucky to have networked people who know people nationally, giving some informal advice about expression of interest. They are saying you should focus your bid on the city because that's really clear about your profile, but actually have a much broader sense of other places across Derbyshire and beyond Derbyshire, potentially things that make sense to include in that year. So absolutely to Chatsworth, the Derwent Valley, other organisations, the Worksworth Festival, things that are happening in Belper, things that are happening more broadly, but the bid will focus on Derby, but then broader afterwards. That's the intention. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Chair. I'll read out what I've got so far. Okay. I'll give it a go anyway. Right. The Executive Scrutiny Board is fully supportive of this cross-party united bid for the city as a whole and resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that if long listed for City of Culture, we ensure that activity and legacy elements are included that will bring new cultural angles to all parts of the city and not just the city centre.
Are we, can you indicate